Welcome to the Fuel, Move, Recover podcast. This show is a complement to the content found at advancingathletics.com. We welcome you into the FMR family, but remember the topics we discuss are not clinical recommendations or medical advice. Hey everyone, this is your friendly neighborhood podcast host, and I wanted to let you know that we had some audio issues, as you'll hear in the episode, with Lindsay's mic. We obviously take the fidelity serious, and that's why the quality has been so good on all the other episodes. We apologize, and there's a lot to get out of this episode, so please be patient with us, and we are definitely working so that this happens as infrequently as possible. So enjoy the show. Have a nice day. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Fuel, Move, Recover. This is episode 8. My name is Michele Iono. I'm joined by my teammates, Alex Uding.
Hey there.
And Lindsay Malone.
Hey, everybody.
As you know, this is everything to do with optimizing human performance and helping you with your nutrition, your exercise, and your stress management, the system we like to call Fuel, Move, Recover. So whether you are a member or not, it's important to us that you feel like you're a part of our family. And so just like every episode, let's start going around the room and see how everybody's days is going and see if anybody's drinking anything unusual or unique. So Alex, you first. How's your day going?
My day's good. Today we started a high school female athlete strength training program. So it was the first day. We're doing it outside to keep social distancing and all that, but it was awesome. The girls were great, and I always enjoyed this part because this is our opportunity to teach kids to learn well, and hopefully that skill set is carried with them as they mature and become adults and in the workforce and things like that. So I always feel like it's a great privilege to teach kids how to move and to appreciate learning what their body is telling them from a young age so they can develop a skill set to manage it as their body changes, as they get older, and as they continue being active. So it was a lot of fun. And I'm just drinking water.
What's the age range, Alex?
It's high school, so it's 9th through 12th grade.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really excellent microcosm, I guess is the word, or it's on a small scale. It's an opportunity to conquer something, that is unique in and of itself, So from soup to nuts, you get started with these exercises, you're not very good at them, you can't move any weight, and then by the end of these programs, you're doing complex versions of the things you started with, and you're moving much more weight than you did before.
Yeah. And it's extremely kind of rewarding to see that. And I think the confidence that builds with it is pretty cool too, especially with kids, the confidence that changes with being insecure about how they're moving and the kind of weight they're moving. And then by the end, owning it. And it's just a cool progression in a very short period of time. And I think it speaks to something all of us experience, even as adults. Once you lay that foundation, you can see then those progressive steps. And it's hard at first, but if you do it right and you kind of layer it, the sky's the limit. So we always can learn so much from kids, and it makes sense when we set up the plan for kids, but we don't always apply the same to us when really there's so many things that are just as applicable. So Lindsay, how was your day? Sorry.
It was good. No, that's all right. I agree with that. I think especially for kids who maybe don't get their confidence from the classroom, I think, something like that is really amazing. We just got back from my son had his last little league game today, and he was bummed because he almost got a home run, but they waved him back to third. All sorts of silly rules in little league, but he had fun, and it was good to see him. So it was good. I am boring and drinking the same thing that I drink most of the time, which is light-hearted ale. I go back and forth between that one and others, but overall, good day. What about you, Michaela?
My day was fun.
Do you have a ceiling yet? That's the most important question.
Well, here, let me show you my ceiling now.
Oh, nice.
All right.
As you see, but I had to trade a ceiling for a bed. So remember, there used to be a bed back here.
Yeah.
Now there's no bed. So there's no beds in any of the rooms here. So I have to sleep on a couch now. So thankfully, I'm a veteran couch sleeper. So I'm able to do that pretty well. So that's not a problem. But the carpet came today, and then we've been getting the new big TV set up, and so it's really nice. Tomorrow we're installing the deck on the back. So a lot of progress is finally being made. So we're going on an elk hunting trip in September, and it was made very clear to all parties involved that all of these renovation projects better be done before we leave on our trip, on our hunting trip. So we have less than 2 months to get all of that done. So As you see, we are finally making progress. And then otherwise, the usual thing of trying to be productive during the day, breaking it up with a run. And we're also taking this opportunity to do some purging, trying to clean out some of the stuff that we have. And I'm seeing how emotional I am when it comes to like this stuff, because it's like, oh, I don't want to get rid of it. Like, I had to ask Alex whether or not to throw out some throw pillows that I had on my couch that Alex had. She's the only person that, was kind enough to actually answer that question, should I throw these out or not? So,
you do not want to live in my house, because I'm a regular. I take everyone's stuff to the Goodwill.
That's awesome.
I'm a regular purger too. I'm with you, Lindsay.
Just gotta get it. I'm not allowed to touch any of the bobbleheads that you see back here or our Indians gear, but everything else.
No, and I really like that.
Gotta go.
My t-shirt collection is problematic, but otherwise I like, in principle it's good. I just am just super duper lazy in general and get very easily distracted, and that is a hell of a combination when you're trying to be productive and clean things. So I think that that's the majority of the root cause of my inability to purge. And then actually, Lindsay, I'll be up. I'm doing some research, some reading up on some hip stuff and some tests and some batteries to be applied for high school kids, because I'm actually going to be in Lyndhurst on Friday. Cool. Yeah.
That's where we were for the game tonight, Lyndhurst.
Oh, really? Yeah. Cool.
That's the league he plays in.
What do you actually, we'll have to maybe talk later about making a delivery for your t-shirt. So since I'll be up there anyway. So I'm meeting with a local high school coach, and we're doing for like a movement workshop on just some of the principles to be able to apply, sound movement principles to high school kids and training and whatnot.
That's awesome.
Which will be especially useful or important, considering, who knows, kids might be in indefinite training mode off season.
It's crazy.
Yeah, like Alex said that things already got canceled or postponed, or whatever word that they're using, right, Al? For the fall.
I think right now everything's postponed at the moment. They're going to decide, I think, middle of September.
Yeah, if it's canceled or not.
Yeah, or they're starting. If they do start, it'll be in September versus August.
Yeah. Well, at least they still have a chance. Like, I know my College of Worcester, the conference that runs the College of Worcester, the athletic conference, the North Coast Athletic Conference, they just canceled all sports through December 31st. So
yeah, the NASDAQ and the Ivy League did as well.
yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, it's a hell of a time for growth, for you to really find something about yourself and whatnot, because it is going to be quite atypical from a training standpoint, for these kids. So,
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's like sports play such like a big role. I know we've talked about this, but you don't realize it until they're gone, and then
Yeah.
just like
Yeah. So hopefully that we can kind of remember this when things come back, and also as things come back, because things will come back. It'll take some time, but things are starting to come back. We're resilient folks. We are figuring this is a good example of post-traumatic growth and how bad shit happens, and then we get better from it, So this is a great opportunity. There's lots of good to come from it. Although I think it is obviously like, we can all kind of, join together and be like, oh man, this kind of stuff.
yeah.
So, because it's true, I don't know. This is what I think about this, Lindsay, is similar to what I think about, like some people put their clock 5 minutes ahead and they're like, well, now I'm always 5 minutes early. Like, that doesn't work for me, because I just remember that I set my clock 5 minutes ahead. So I'm like, oh, I got five. Oh, my clock is 5 minutes behind,
Yeah.
I don't know. That just,
I don't
I have a
understand
really
that
hard
either.
time. I have a really hard time with that. So I would rather just like admit or accept or, figure out what time I have to get up for, for the day, and then just try to actually do that.
Yeah.
So, although I'm terrible about getting up, so maybe I need to find something else too. So, so I heard this story of this one writer who he heard an interview in college that Tiger Woods never hits the snooze button. And so ever since college, he developed the habit of not hitting the snooze. And now it's something that he lives with. It's like, damn, I wish I would have, done that.
Had that
boy, oh boy.
aha moment.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't hit the snooze. I can't do it. I just get
Really?
up. I can't do it. Because once
Yeah.
I'm up, I'm up. It's like,
That's how I
there's
feel.
no going back. I wish that I could just roll over and have another hour of sleep. Like my mind just like, I can't.
Yeah.
It starts going.
I have to put my alarm clock across the room because I will subconsciously turn it off if it's next to me. It's
That's
that
a
bad.
nice trick. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, unless there's anybody else in my domicile, and then they have to listen to, blaring, either an alarm or blaring NPR playing, as I'm trying to, wake my ass up. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, and then I'm drinking a beer from another new beer. It's called The Road Most Taken by Platform.
Oh, I love Platform.
And I like it because that's a really good suction on that koozie, because it's a very pretty can.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Again, the listeners can't see the pretty can, so just look it up. Okay. So, but it's a fruity, like me, hazy IPA that's brewed with peaches and strawberries.
Good summer.
Yeah, and I could
Good
taste
summer beer.
the strawberries for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. So, with that being said, this is actually a podcast about things like, human performance and wellness and all those things. So I guess we should slowly make our way towards those topics. But before we get there, let's talk about some more fun, unrelated things. So first of all, Enclothed cognition. Have you ever heard of that, Alex?
I have not.
So that's so I knew that there's evidence for, or there's benefits to compartmentalizing, kind of like we talked about on the last show, where, you wear your work clothes at work and then you change and then you go home, and it's like it's part ritualistic, separating your work life from your home life or vice versa. So that's a thing. But actually, they've actually done research on this that Lindsay informed me is called the Enclothed cognition concept. And it came out like in 2012, I want to say. So from our most trusted source, Wikipedia, it says while Adam and Galinsky, who are the authors, while they coined the phrase of enclothed cognition, the concept of clothing affecting one's experiential cognition is not new. There have been several other relevant areas of study and consideration. First, some of these are kind of funny. Formal clothes help one feel authoritative and powerful, even if you are less friendly and creative. How is that related? You can feel authoritative and powerful, even if you're less friendly and creative.
Well, maybe it's like recognizing that some of like our best leaders are also very creative people, and they've gotten successful through some of their creative outlets to be different and to build their brand or their business or what they do. So maybe it's that.
That was a really good, serious answer. I wasn't expecting you to give such a well thought out, serious answer. So Wikipedia goes on to say, it can also enhance the ability to think abstractly as well as the ability to negotiate. There's some other things. Activewear or gym clothes boost the likelihood of both actually working out as well as making healthier choices. So, I mean, that is a real thing. We know that that's a real thing.
Yeah, I actually wrote this Wikipedia page. That's why I had such a formal answer for the last one.
Luxury brand names or lack thereof can affect even political viewpoints. Does it make you more or less conservative? Is there, a tie there?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think probably more, but that's an assumption.
That's what I want to know. And then brightly colored clothes can improve our mood, while more dull colors can create a more mellow mood. And then lastly, this is the best. Socks and underwear, even though not seen, can increase confidence and self-image.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I'm wearing both socks and underwear right now. So.
And your confidence is through the roof.
Through the roof.
I actually, this is going to sound crazy, but so for most of my school life, I wore a uniform, and I didn't have good, you always have the good socks in your drawer that you want to wear. And then there's the socks you only wear if you have to.
So
I always felt like I had better days if I was wearing the good socks, whatever they were at the moment,
Yeah.
I almost feel like I feel the same even now.
Right now? Well,
if I'm having a bad day or I really want to kick my day off, right? I'm going to pick my good socks.
Alex, go ahead. Tell Lindsay and the world, everyone who's listening. Go ahead.
Michele strongly feels that his socks from Vermont, the Darn Tough brand socks, are healing. Yeah. And so he is a big proponent. If he's sick or not feeling great, he puts on the healing powers of Vermont, and it usually does the trick.
Yep. Great. And now I'm getting all hot, so I have to strip down to my tank top now. So, and actually, Alex was there.
I believe that.
Do you, that I'm stripping down, or that Vermont has healing powers?
Well, yeah, I believe. Now, this is a topic for a whole nother show, but I think whatever you think is going to make you feel better, 9 times out of 10.
Oh, totally with you.
Yeah.
We even had a client. I had a client. Alex can vouch for this. Where he sprained his ankle pretty well, and he wasn't feeling that great. And then he went for a week up to Vermont, or a weekend up to Vermont with his grandparents to stay there. And he came back, he had no pain. It's completely healed.
There's a lot.
I mean, if that's not science.
I've never been there, but what do we have out of Vermont? Bernie Sanders, Ben and Jerry's. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You can get, did you say the teddy bear?
No, I said Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Oh, I thought you said something before that.
Bernie Sanders.
Yes, Bernie. Right? You can see Bernie.
Good maple syrup.
You can get some maple syrup. You can go get yourself a Vermont teddy bear. And then they make this, there's this one place Shout out to, what was that place called, Alex? The Country Deli, right?
Vermont Country Deli.
So the next topic for us to cover quickly is what's the opposite of snob. There really seems to be no answer here. What is that? An antonym, right? The opposite.
Yeah.
Synonym is the same. Antonym's the opposite, whichever
Yes,
one it
you're
is.
right.
So somebody suggested plebeian. So if you're a plebe, I think that goes back to Roman days and the equestrian hierarchy and the plebeians. But then somebody said you can still be a commoner or plebe and still think you're better than everyone else. So I think there's no real solution here. So we're just going to move on from that. It's not really funny. It's not informative or funny. And we promise to be at least one of those two things. Moving on. This is my question before we get into actual paying member questions is, Lindsay, can you tell us the difference between homogenized and non-homogenized milk? Because I get this non-homogenized milk from Hartzler's Dairy down in Worcester.
Oh yeah. This is like something that I like always knew about, but like I like had to research this for an article that I was writing last week actually. So I always knew the difference, but now I know a little bit more about it. So homogenized milk is where they take the milk and basically like blast it through a screen almost. I'm simplifying this to break up the fat globules. And so the fat is then emulsified in the milk and it's creamier. The idea is people are kind of put off by the cream rising to the top of milk. They don't want to see it. They don't want to shake it. They just want it to be like creamy and mixed up, kind of like, salad dressing, for lack of a better example. And so I was reading, trying to figure out, like, is it better for you if it's not? And there is some research on like nutrients and the size of the fat globules and digestion of the protein in the fat, but there's nothing like super conclusive. But that Hartzler's Dairy, really good. And there's another one. I think that is the one that I get. It's in the glass bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they're
So
like
just last week, I had like a revolt at my house because the cream was on the top and what was wrong with the milk. I'm like, you just have to shake it. It says it on the bottle.
There's nothing wrong with it.
You eat butter, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. But I did notice that it seems to be a little more tangy.
Yeah.
So if you don't like tangy, then good luck drinking this.
It's a sign of good bacteria, though. That like tart taste, especially in a dairy product. But I had to go back to, we're doing A2 milk now, which is like a different type of protein. So
the only hard part is like if you take a drink of milk and then you're having to like chew all the butter that's in the glass.
So I had to go back to the other. But as right now, like I literally looked everywhere. I could not find any, even on Hartzler's website, they talk about some nutritional differences, but I couldn't find any research that like, conclusively said, more nutrients or higher absorption or whatever. Mm-hmm. So maybe someone from Hartzler's can correct me if I'm wrong, but I couldn't find anything.
So let's jump into our questions now. And the first one, so just to get everybody up to speed, that this is our family week, and with some feedback from some of our patrons, and with us communicating and thinking about how to really help you folks get the most out of this, we thought that we would direct a little bit more the family week. And so that's why there will be a special topic that goes along with each one, unless we just do a mailbag episode of leftover questions that we have. So for this week, it is everything related to sleep. So, and then we have a few unrelated questions at the end that people threw in that were good questions, but we just didn't have time to get to at the end of previous shows. So here are the sleep questions that we'll jump into. And the first one is from Abby R. She says, I enjoy the evening/night hours and often need to relax for a while right after work. This means my workouts can get pushed back to 8 or 9 p.m. Are there any types of physical activity I should definitely avoid within an hour or two before going to bed? I think first, Alex, do you want to tackle this one?
Well, I think sometimes with activity, it can, we've talked a lot about how it can raise your system and your alertness. I've seen some research saying, it's very person dependent. Some people can come down from a workout easier than others, that it might not affect their sleep. Others, if people stay in that heightened state and they have difficulty coming out of it, it can prolong someone's ability to fall asleep. So kind of knowing that it can be person dependent. And I think in general, a lot of the original thought behind it was not recommending workouts before bedtime. But I think there is some shift in that more recently. But I think it's, as we talk about a lot, finding what works for you. I think, certain workouts are I think more high demand, high intensity workouts might bring your system to a higher level that's harder to come down from. So it may be not necessarily doing HIIT training or a sprint workout or things like that beforehand. If you have a harder time coming down from that, maybe you choose a long duration exercise instead, a steady state cardio. Maybe you do yoga or a strength routine that's a little more control based versus high intensity. But again, even strengthening can sometimes rev up the system. All of these can change how you connect with your body system. And so I think the biggest thing is making sure if you do work out and you find that you can fall asleep after, maybe it becomes important to stress the recovery afterwards. So making sure you incorporate a cool down, or you have a routine that maybe emphasizes some breathing, like we talked about. The diaphragmatic breath can stimulate your vagus nerve, which can help you enter into that resting stimulation, resting body system. So maybe working some diaphragmatic breaths at the end to kind of start bringing you back to that resting state.
I also think that, we need an idea from Abby about how well or not well she's sleeping. Yeah. And then that would also help us guide some of the recommendations. She doesn't mention it per se, but she is writing a question about this, so you would think that she might have some trouble with that. The only other thing, and just like I want Lindsay to, give her thought on this, is that if you are exercising almost right before bed, you risk losing the benefit of whatever you do because you aren't doing all of the important steps afterwards, the fueling, the recovery, like Alex already talked about. So maybe, Lindsay, you can give us just a quick rundown on some of the different considerations for how to fuel right before bed, even though, depending on types of workouts or whatnot.
Yeah, I think, we talk about fasting a lot, and I think when we talk about sleep, kind of the most important job that you have is avoiding things that are going to interfere with the ability to get good restful sleep. Now, you also want to fuel to support that recovery time, while you're sleeping. But first, you just want to don't get in your own way and eat, chips and salsa right before you go to bed or something like that. So if you have a workout and you really do want to, get some protein in after, I really like just plain collagen because it's tasteless. You could even put it in a cup of tea or, just plain water. So a lot of times what I would recommend is, pick your beverage, hot or cold. If it's cold, you can just mix it into water. If it's warm, I think the herbal tea works best just because of it doesn't really have a flavor, but it's kind of salty. Have either of you guys had collagen?
Mm-mm.
So it has, it's not like other protein powders. It mixes almost completely clear, especially in a warm liquid. So you could literally, a lot of people put it in their coffee or tea, and it is a complete protein, and it's actually a little bit higher in the amino acids that support your gut health, like glycine. But at night, it can be really good because there's no carbs, no fat, maybe a small amount of fat, but not really any to speak of. So it's not going to take a long time to digest. It's not going to feel heavy in your stomach. You're not even going to feel like you've eaten anything. And technically, your body is still going to think you're fasting because your blood sugar hasn't turned on. You don't have to do a lot of digesting. So after a workout, I would do that. And I know we have a question coming up about supplements, and I think supplements can play a role, particularly for nutrients that you don't get a lot of in your diet. So at night is a great time to take magnesium. Most people don't get enough magnesium. The supplement that I usually recommend is a magnesium glycinate. It's very relaxing and not expensive. It's not going to give you an upset stomach or anything. So that's a really nice way to like move into sleep. So if you worked out, maybe you have your collagen, take a shower, have some magnesium, and that's a nice way to like support your muscles, get your nervous system nice and relaxed, and get ready for bed.
Well said. Our next question comes from Anthony P., and he says, I get plenty of fluids and movement throughout the day. I recently started taking melatonin, and I still struggle with sleep, and I don't have any stress or anything on my mind. If I could improve in this area, I would feel better, and I feel that I would see better results as well. So I'll start off on this one. The first thing is that there must be some reason why he's not getting enough sleep. So he says he gets plenty of fluids, plenty of movement, he thinks, and now he's starting to take a supplement as well. My thought is that if your schedule varies, that will have an effect on your body's ability to regulate your downtime, your circadian rhythm. So that will be a problem. Also, even if you may not have anything actively on your mind, doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't things like in the subconscious that are kind of brewing that you kind of just almost have to hold on to. You can't let go of because you have to remember these things for whatever the reason, or because you didn't let it go. And I think that would be my first, not knowing whether or not this is true or not. I would recommend, if he's got kids, that would impact the way he stays up at night or his routine at the end of the day. So the first thing I would really recommend is get in the habit of developing, maybe he's watching TV right before he goes to bed. There's a lot of different things that he could be doing that are unintentionally hijacking his ability to fall asleep, to get tired. You need to think about the last time you had stimulants, whether that's nicotine or even caffeine. You also need to think about how stimulated your brain is, how much time you spend looking at the computer or the TV screen or your phone before bed, as well as what does your routine look like leading up immediately before bed, like the 30 minutes before bed. So are you shutting the TV off, reading a book, winding yourself down like that? Or are you just turning off Netflix and then just jumping right into bed? So these right off the bat, those are some of the things that I would want to know before whether you blame the effectiveness or lack thereof of the melatonin, or potentially try to modify some of these other things, try to add more on to what you're doing already.
In my experience, it's like melatonin either works for people or it doesn't. I'm sure there's a genetic component there, but I mean, it's hit or miss. There's not many people where it like, kind of works. It either does or it doesn't. And I would agree with the kind of the stress hormones circulating, maybe for other reasons. Even if you don't think that you have stress, you might just have a lot on your mind or a busy schedule. And then also cortisol so cortisol, your stress hormone, it can be going for other reasons, not related to mental stress. Your other hormones can influence cortisol levels. And if your circadian rhythm is off for some reason because of the light that you're exposed to, your body might be pumping out the cortisol that would normally be a morning level of cortisol, which would be normal at a different time of day. There are a number of ways to, you can start by dialing down the light. You can also there are salivary cortisol tests. They're, kind of a pain in the butt, but if you were like a real numbers kind of person and you wanted to see, you can actually test through your saliva at different periods of the day, and then you'll get a chart and it'll show like normal healthy cortisol compared to your cortisol. And then, for a lot of people that gives them motivation for, okay, I'm going to be more mindful of the light and stress and all these different things.
Yeah, I think a few things. Certainly, did he say in it that he works overnight?
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay.
Specify that, but if he does.
But I think so. Like we've talked about, there's good stress, bad stress, everything in between kind of stress, and stress is a state that's brought on. He talks about how he's very active, and that's great. That can be a positive stress, but it's also, you have to remember with that, you have to have the recovery component as well that takes you out of that state. Not because being active was a bad state, but we have to come out of that sometimes as well, to be able to enter sleep in a restful state. So some of it might be also just making sure that maybe there is a routine to come down in transition states that maybe he needs to incorporate in. I think it's also important, like considering the sleep environment. Your body temperature has to go down when you're sleeping. So I think making sure that he's managing the temperature of his room, and what he's wearing or what kind of blankets he's using could become important. I think, ambient sounds, like is the environment quiet? Is it noisy? Would white noise benefit him to have something in the background that drowns out other things? How light it is. So, does he need shades to help make it darker in the room? And I think one thing that they've kind of shown, if you're having trouble falling asleep after a certain amount of time, it doesn't benefit you to stay in your bed. Leave your room after 20, or they usually say like 20 to 30 minutes, leave your room, do another calming activity, and then try again. Because if you're just sitting there paying attention to the fact that you're not sleeping, you're going to feel some sort of way about it. And it's, again, going to trigger some kind of response in you that might actually take you further away from being able to rest. Thinking about what a lot of our viewers have commented on, like some of just the shifts in routine that people are experiencing now with their work and just life being a little bit different. This doesn't necessarily, it sounds like his work, he's still leaving, coming back. But I do think about our viewers who maybe might be working in their rooms right now, or it's transitioned into like a room office situation and things like that. Like if you've noticed your sleep has been affected since you started being at home a little bit more, that might be something I consider is taking work outside of your bedroom. Like your bedroom should be for like sleep and personal time with like a spouse or significant other, like, and that's what it should be for. Don't do your work in your room. Don't do things that preoccupy your mind in your room, because that should be the place, again, that you're falling asleep, you're entering your restful state in. But if all your stimulating activities are also in there, we might not make that transition. Just like what you wear matters, the environment matters too. And I think the other thing, movement, of course, for me, I also want to think about your comfort. Are you actually comfortable lying down? Are you experiencing pressure or discomfort or pain? Is it a positional thing? Is it a mattress thing? Do you need support somewhere or less support somewhere? That I always like to consider is just the position your body in, maybe contributing to either waking up in the middle of the night or having difficulty falling asleep. And you just need to make some modifications there.
And the one thing that I'll add is that my recommendation when I work with clients and we're talking about improving their sleep or sleep position is that you have to run a dress rehearsal. You have to go to your room. You have to check the temperature. You have to check to make sure everything is in place. Because if you're relying on waiting, if you're trying to modify things or optimize things when you're exhausted and you can barely, and you're really groggy, if you have trouble sleeping, you still are probably exhausted. And so if you wait until then to make modifications, then you're really going to struggle, odds are, because you're just not going to get it set up right, So that'd be another recommendation, is to do a dress rehearsal, try to figure out this stuff before the end of the night. So our next question is very similar to the one from Anthony P that we just answered. And it comes from Mike I. And remember that Mike I is writing to us as a member, which you can be as well. For as little as $9.99 a month, you'll have full access to us and get your questions answered, discounts to our store, as well as other perks. So go ahead and go to the website and you can see more there. But for Mike, he says, I, along with Anthony, drink plenty of water/fluids during the day, but have trouble sleeping. I have tried melatonin and my PCP recommended Benadryl and still have a hard time falling asleep for about 2 to 3 years now. Headspace has been tried, but doesn't seem to work/stick. Besides avoiding late night workouts, what are some other strategies that I could enact in my sleep routine? I'd like to try and avoid supplements at all costs, as I don't want to be dependent on any of that stuff. What's the go-to sleep position? So I'll let Alex answer that one. And then if there's any other supplements that Lindsay wants to touch on, the one thing I will say for sure is that Benadryl is an antihistamine. That's the mechanism from which it works. And it has been shown that these overuse of antihistamines is correlated with early onset or worsening dementia. So there seems to be some connection between overuse of these antihistamines, which make you sleepy, and the cognitive decline. So that is certainly yet another reason for Mike I and all of us to further ourselves from a dependence on these antihistamines to help us get to sleep on a regular basis. So my general 2 thoughts that I would say to Mike is, number one, keep trying. So Headspace, I think, is the app he's referring to. That didn't work. There are lots of other ones that he can try. We talked a lot about them last week. Reach out to us if you want help. The other thing is not knowing him and his routine. With Anthony, we talked a lot about grace and a lot about figuring out what's wrong. The only other thing that I'll offer, which is the reverse of what we discussed with Anthony, is discipline. So we talked about grace with Anthony. Now let's talk about discipline with Mike, in that you have to set the same way you schedule your day to be productive, that you should also schedule your evening or your night so that you can ensure that you're winding down. So if you'd like to be in bed by 10:30, let's say, and it's 10, and on Netflix, you just finished an episode, and now you're like, well, I really want to hit this next episode. Well, number one, but they're an hour long. Well, that's going to push you to 11. And so you're 30 minutes later than when you would want to get to bed. And you're getting that blue light stimulation, which we know is not right. So this is where some discipline, and maybe that doesn't apply to Mike, but that certainly applies to some of us, is that also having some discipline to hold yourself to a routine to make sure that you are getting into bed. So, because the hard part is that you get to this point to where now you've been dealing with 2 or 3 years and you're just kind of used to being tired all the time. So it's really hard to force yourself to change things whenever you just have adapted to it. So then with that, Lindsay, do you want to speak to any of the other supplements or anything?
Yeah. So if you don't want to take supplements, you could do an Epsom salt bath for the magnesium. And then it's just absorbed kind of through your skin. You're going to take a shower anyway. It's not really adding an extra step. I mean, it's just a different, way of doing it. So that can really help. But I agree, with all these sleep questions, the thing, all the same things are running through. Like, think of it like a checklist. Is your room cool? Um, is your bed comfortable? How much blue light have you gotten during the day? All of these things, would be the checklist that I would go through.
Alex, how about the best go-to sleep position?
I don't know if I can say there is a best position without knowing a person and their body shape and their just movement and pain history. Like I don't like telling someone there's a perfect way to sleep because to be honest, like how much control can we always have? Sometimes we have no idea what we're doing in the middle of the night. And I don't want to instill with someone that there's only one right way to sleep because there's not. I think the biggest thing is I find people tend to feel the best when whatever position they find themselves going into, that their natural curves of their musculoskeleton is supported. So if you are on your stomach, you want to make sure, like, one possible thing that might help is putting a pillow underneath your pelvis, because then it doesn't force the natural curve of your back to arch more than maybe it needs to. If someone's on their back, our legs are long, heavy things that are attached to our trunk that can really pull us forward. So putting something underneath the knees might take some pressure off the low back. So really it's this game of pressure, I find. And so depending on the sleep position that he finds himself in, it might be giving some support or taking some support away. Some people use a ton of pillows. Some people don't use any pillows at all. When it comes to like head and neck, it's like, are you reaching for the surface or is the surface pushing you away? Do we need to find the middle ground? I think there's a lot to positioning. And so if he wanted to take a picture of himself and send it to me and we talk through this, I'm more than happy to do that with him. But to me, there is no perfect position. The other things that I also consider, besides, your movement history and maybe potential pain and pressure issues, is also, are there reflex issues where maybe they're suffering from like heartburn? And sometimes lying on your right side can make that worse. So if that's an issue and you're lying on your right side, maybe you flip to your left side and kind of opens you up a little bit better. Maybe you need to, depending how arched or straight up and down you are, that can influence reflex. Is apnea an issue where you just stop breathing for a little bit? You have those lapses, so if someone notes that he's always snoring or there's long pauses, that might be something worth checking out. And then finally, there's a lot of research coming out in supporting the use of weighted blankets. They can be used for a lot of different things and reasons. But adding that compression, the idea with it is it gives this deep pressure into the body, and kind of think why we like massage, right? It's a deep pressure into our system and we feel differently when that pressure is provided. It's kind of, it goes along with giving this compression, this sensory input into you. And so it can have this relaxing effect for a lot of people. There's a lot of good research in it with different things like ADD, with autism. They're doing it in surgeries now. They're putting it on people during surgeries at dentist offices, because for a lot of people, the dentist is a very stressful situation. And so getting that compression helps to calm people down. So that's one thing also that can be explored. Speaking personally, like my mind races and I wake myself up during the middle of the night, like from sleeping. And I got a blanket and it made all the difference in the world for me. I don't wake up anymore during the middle of the night. Like it was like an immediate effect for me. And that's just my personal thing and how my body adjusted to it and my brain worked with it. But it made a huge difference for me. And so when people start exploring the world of weighted blankets, generally it's about 10 when you're looking for like what weight is right for you. It's about 5 to 10%, usually closer to the 10% side of your body weight. They recommend for a grown adult.
Yeah, I use one as well, and I absolutely love it. So I think mine's like 25 pounds, which used to be like 10% of my body weight, but I actually don't think it's heavy enough. But they can be kind of pricey. So like the one that I got, well, they are certainly pricey. The one I got was at Walmart, and it was pretty affordable. I think it was like $50. So that might be someplace you can try first, and then before venturing into more expensive ones. The one other thing that I'll add before we move on is that we are not shaped as human beings to sleep on our sides. So if you notice is that we've got arms sticking out on either side, and then there's the rib cage, and then there's your flanks or your abdomen, and that's all squishy stuff, but your ribs are firm stuff, and then you got your hip bones and your pelvis. So that is not the shape biomechanically that we are meant to spend a lot of time on those pressure points. So if you are a side sleeper, that's fine. I agree with everything Alex had said, but just don't be surprised if you need to modify or support yourself better, like putting a pillow under your rib cage to support your back in a more neutral position. So sometimes that can be the fault, the problem too, is that you aren't falling asleep because you're not really comfortable, and then eventually you just pass out. But
I think one thing to add to your consistency concept as well is that you want to try to keep your sleep schedule as similar as you can day to day. So that includes the weekends as well. So keeping that in mind that, yes, maybe you want to, on your days off or on the weekend, depending how your schedule works, don't necessarily try to think like completely change what you do, because the body has a hard time adjusting to that. And I think certainly with this audience and workers that we are talking to here, I think, shift work and swing schedules are a very difficult thing to adjust to with sleeping as well. And so acknowledging how that might be playing a role. I don't know if he has normal work hours or not, but certainly for our overnight workers, I think it would, I feel strongly that we should talk about also making sure like it's light out when you're trying to go to bed. And so making sure that your room is dark enough when you're driving home from work, put a hat on, put some sunglasses on, even if, that can help just darken your environment a little bit. And I had one person say that they wear their sunglasses in their house even once they get home, just to keep it a little bit darker until they enter their room where it's the darkest place. I always talk about families just because I grew up with a cop as my father, like being the child of someone who worked overnight. It was just a family rule that dad sleeps during the day, we all have to be quiet, like having those conversations with your family about noise levels and go outside or go somewhere else if you want to be noisy. But it just became like this family situation where we were just aware, and he never adjusted his schedule. He always, unless he was changing his shift or there was a big event that he had to accommodate, he always kept his the same. Some people try to swing and they end up, it can be really hard on the body. So if you're having trouble always trying to adjust your schedule, maybe it becomes make it consistent and always kind of choose roughly the same hours. And if you're transitioning out and you know your schedule is going to change for some reason, give your body the time to make the changes. And I think that can be true for if your work shift is changing, but maybe you're traveling and you're changing time zones, or your routine is changing because the kids are going back to school. Give yourself I talk about with like my high schoolers, give yourself 2 weeks to start adjusting. Change your alarm clock 15 minutes every day until you're at your school kind of schedule, just to give yourself that adjustment and that practice to change routine. I think it's the same if you're traveling. Obviously, you're not going to give yourself 2 weeks, but maybe for the few days before, you adjust your clock an hour just to get you closer to the time zone that you are going to be in. Or if you're changing your work schedules, staying up 1 hour later, sleeping in as much as you can to get you closer to where that work shift takes place.
So we have one more sleep question, and then we'll get to a few unrelated questions, general rapid fire questions. And this one comes from John S., and he asks, is the idea of a quote unquote sleep bank a legitimate idea? Is it possible to deposit extra sleep hours a day before, if I know I will be short on sleep the next night? Or the other way around, if I miss sleep for a couple days, can I make up the benefits of sleeping extra the next day or two? So I'll answer that one really quick before we get to the second half of John's question. And in general, yes, there is such a thing as a sleep bank. There is evidence that shows that it's the relative average of how much sleep you get over the course of a week that is as important as how much sleep you get on a night-to-night basis. So you can make up for some of that quote-unquote sleep debt. So because it's a running average, the same thing would apply to obviously trying to be proactive about your sleep. So you won't set off, so you will be able to ward off or correct some of the negatives that come with not sleeping enough. The second part of that, the caveat to that is it's only to a point. There is a certain amount of debt, sleep debt, that once is accrued, you cannot repay no matter what. It just is that much worsening of your mental and physical function, like long term. For example, there's a lot of evidence that's coming out about people who sleep poorly and onset of dementia and Alzheimer's. So in general, if you run yourself ragged, you're screwing yourself. You're not going to be able to catch up. But if you're having to get up because of kids, or you're having to get up because of work, or whatever the reason is, or staying up late, then yeah, on a small scale, you can make up for that. So the second half of John's question is another question. I noticed that on days I deadlift heavy, I stay quote unquote revved up, even though I usually work out around 1 p.m. and go to bed around 11. I know deadlifts are very taxing on the nervous system, but then shouldn't deadlifts make me more sleepy versus alert and awake? I have coffee in the morning. It's out of my system by bedtime, and no pre-workout. So I'm sure that it isn't a caffeine issue. So first, let's have Alex talk a little bit more about the exercise component of this.
I think the awareness to recognizing that the deadlift really does amp him up is important. I think a few things with it. So what does the rest of the workout routine look like? Are you shutting things down at the end? So are you cooling down, and do you have a recovery routine at the end that maybe can take you out of that state? Or even if it's not immediate and you're just trying to get out of the gym, making sure that you incorporate something since you know you're revved up to bring you back down later. So, and I think that can come in a few different forms. It can come in with some activation exercises that are just kind of, intentional, smaller exercises that promote movement, but aren't you trying, where you're focusing more on how you move and what it feels like versus I'm trying to lift something really hard. I think the caveat with that is if you are the person that does everything at 1,000%, you need to make sure if you're doing these active movements that they're done with minimal effort. And I mean minimal effort as in minimal and less intensity and more intention. Maybe yoga is the answer. Maybe you do something where the focus is shifted from a high intensity exercise like deadlifting. Maybe you foam roll, maybe you do breathing, and any of those can hopefully just provide input that is different than what's revving you up. I think too, in recognizing deadlift, you're going to Valsalva for a little bit to build some pressure to help you lift the weight. We talked about pressure building and things like that. When you're lifting, you want to use the whole system. So I'd be curious in his deadlift technique, is it a lot of breath holding and less assistance from other parts of the core? Where maybe if he balances those out a little bit more and relies less on the breath hold, maybe he won't be quite as amped up. So that's just something in the back of my mind, but I think that takes a little more coaching and a little bit more looking at. Certainly, again, I'm not, we have to create internal pressure. And so there is going to be that component, but I'd just be curious about that.
Well, I have a couple of different things, but the first one would be, maybe your, eating habits change with that type of workout. Maybe you're hungrier, maybe you eat a larger meal, but what you're eating could certainly affect, your ability to go to sleep. If you're eating too heavy, or if you're eating, a larger meal that, obviously that can interfere with sleep. The other thing I would say is, if you are creating, when you're working out, you're breaking down the muscles, right? And then they have to be repaired. If you're doing a harder workout, you would probably be producing more human growth hormone after that to repair the muscles, and that can cause a cortisol cascade also. And then that's going to keep you up. So if it's a harder workout, physically, I mean, that would be what I would be thinking about.
And that triggered what I forgot. Yeah. So exactly for what Lindsay said is sometimes we need to pick and choose what we do what day. And I know sometimes people really like having this regimen to their workout routine. But we've talked about in the past too, having some flexibility with it for when maybe we've talked about in the context of having an off day and listening to your body when you need rest. I think recognize the workout in the context of your day. So if you've had a really stressful day, picking a super stressful workout might not be the best combination because then you're just staying revved up. You might want to pick and choose a little bit. So if you've had a really good day, you're ready to lift, you've got, you are okay with what the result is going to be from that deadlift, knowing it's going to rev you up. Perfect. Go for it. But if you've had a day where it's just been one of those days and you are just already fired up and you are concerned about sleeping later, that might be a reason to maybe say, okay, I'm going to skip deadlift today. I'm just going to change my routine a little bit. I'll hit it up another day. And maybe recognizing that too, how do you pair your workout with the rest of your day and what you need? And maybe that in some capacity is influencing your sleep cycle.
So we have a few final questions that we just didn't get to from different episodes. And so we'd like to get to those now while we can. So the first one comes from Curtis B. He asks, can you give me some examples of a good balanced fast meal in recovery or for after a stressful event. I am always on the go, and if I'm myself causing more stress by not eating healthy. Are you, and then he asks, are you familiar with Optavia?
I'm
Octavia?
not, but I'm sure it's a shake of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's just probably what it is.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to
yeah, we
Google it
could
while you're
look at it.
talking.
Ooh, okay. I think it depends on what your definition of fast is, but if you were at the beginning of the week to make one or two things, like some rice, some grilled chicken, egg muffins. You guys ever eat egg muffins?
Love
Like
those.
an omelet, but you make it in a muffin tin.
Mm-hmm.
So quick. So that is one option. If you're in the situation where I haven't thought in advance, I always have a ton of like grab and go, like baby carrots, string cheese, good crackers, hummus, guacamole, that kind of thing, blueberries, cherry tomatoes, like things that I can grab. And you could just, make yourself a little plate of that. And it may not be a hot meal, but you're hitting all the components, carbs, protein, fat. I always have some cold protein shakes. I prefer to make them, but if I don't have time, I like Orgain makes nice, clean protein shakes. You can get them at Costco, and GNC has a similar version. And, if it's cold, then you could do that with a couple of these more snacky items. The key is having them in your house. So whether you have time or not to prep, what are you buying at the grocery store?
Optavia or Optavia? It's got to be Optavia. That sounds way better. Even though I feel like
Yeah.
Optavia is like how you say it in Italian. So, I am borderline illiterate. That's why I touch people for a living. I've been told not to say it like that, but here I am. So it seems to be one of these online like community things, Lindsay.
Oh, okay. I was wrong.
Like maybe they send you meals, I think.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so maybe it's like what's that thing called? Blue Apron, I think, or Butcher Box, something. Blue
Yeah,
Apron.
there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I think it's like one of those things plus coaching.
Yeah.
That's what.
So I am not familiar with it, which doesn't mean it isn't good. But I would say if you want to order like meals to have at your house, I'm a big fan. The one that I like and that I have experience with is called Factor 75, and they have meals that you would just you could freeze them or keep them in the refrigerator and heat them up. Good quality, lots of options. Things that I would probably pick out at the store in terms of quality, and it's not outrageous.
So maybe try that, Curtis. Maybe tell us. Maybe you can write in next week and give us your experience with Octavia. Octavia. How I can't. I all I say is Octavia now.
Yeah.
And also, I guess maybe how to pronounce it. Maybe he doesn't even know either. But so yeah. So let us know if you had success with it or whatnot. And then remember too is that if you find yourself with that guidance, then you're talking to people that can help you. Specifically Lindsay with this stuff. So don't be afraid to reach out for that too. I mean, this is what she does for a living. Furthermore, then maybe if you're needing to order your meals, your issue is organization rather than execution. So maybe you might have some success if you could plan out your meal prep more. So just another thought. Jean G asks, I have a question regarding running. Can you discuss the role of glute muscles in running? Can you explain why they're often weak or not firing in runners? What exercises or stretches do you recommend for this? Thank you. Solve all of this in you get 2 minutes.
So I think a lot of times, if we are not aware of them, how to connect with a muscle group, we're less likely to use it, or depending what our patterns are and how we move throughout the day, and then in running itself might influence whether we use it or don't use it. So kind of thinking a lot of for the folks that sit all day, your glutes are resting in a lengthened position. And so we've talked about this before, that sometimes when something is long, it's not always good at generating strength to get back to a more shortened position, and vice versa. Sometimes you can be so short where those are the people where I think if you have, do you ever see like the butt tuckers or the butt squeezers where all they do is like tuck their butt or squeeze their butt all day? That's them in a shortened position. And so we don't want to live on those extreme positions of always being in a shortened position or always being in a lengthened position, because it's hard to utilize your strength in those two positions. So do I want to be able to control my length? Yes. Do I want to be able to get short? Yes. But I want to be able to move between the two. And I probably don't want to live on either end of that. Now, in terms of, so I think that's a big reason why sometimes a lot of us, our glutes tend to rest in a lengthened position, or some of us rest in a shortened position. Then when we go to try to use our glutes in running is like a game of angles. So depending on where something is, it could be depending where your trunk is, depending where your pelvis is, depending where your foot is, all is going to change the advantage of the glute to be in a lengthened position or a shortened position, or how it gets turned on. And so I don't want to say it's hard for runner for this reason without seeing someone actually run. But I think a lot of times I see people, you really rely on their like the front muscles to drive them where they're going, their quad muscles, their hip flexors, and like their calf muscles to kind of drive them. And so in doing that, depending what their technique looks like, that might position them where then they can't turn on the glute as well. If they're overstriding, it might be harder to turn on the glute. If they're running super upright and their pelvis is dumped forward, it might be hard. There's so many reasons. And so it's hard for me to go in the details, and I'm happy to break it down with her on the side about this. But I think the biggest thing is when we run, the hip has to go from the flex position to the extended position, and it has to go through that excursion for the glute to turn on. We have to reach hip extension to do it. So the glute has to be able, when we flex that hip up and that knee's driving forward, before you're getting ready to accept weight on it, the glute is getting lengthened. And so it has to be able to control that. And then as soon as as we've accepted weight on our foot and we start to drive forward, that's when the glute should be working and starting to turn on to help get that hip extension to drive us forward. Now the glute's going to play other roles as well in terms of how much rotation our legs have, or our thigh has. But I think that's the big one, is when they're striding out in front of them, where's the foot landing? Can the glute be at an advantage to, as you accept your weight onto it, then shorten and turn on to drive off it? And so that's what I'm looking at, is how are they driving and how are they accepting their weight, and how is everything above influencing that position, and how is everything below influencing that position? And so that's why the answer might not be glute stretching. If you rest in a lengthened position all the time, I'm not going to tell you to stretch more. You're already stretching a lot. So you're going to be the person where I give you exercises to strengthen. Someone shortened, I'm going to give exercises on how to eccentrically control the lengthening of the glute. And I want to make sure that you can get the glute to lengthen and get to shorten. So, there's a lot of isolated, quote unquote isolated, nothing's truly isolated, but you want to make sure that you do exercises that emphasize hip extension to target the glutes. The glute max, I should say.
And what we can potentially do, well, I almost for certainly we'll do to add into our list of poop and coffee, we should also do an episode on running.
Yeah.
So, and that'll give us an opportunity to spell some of these things out more. As also, you can also check out our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/MIONNO. And what that should allow you to is to search through our library of videos, and we talk about a lot of different exercises, and we'll always be adding to that moving forward. So our last question in this mailbag episode is from Mark P, and he says, reflexive performance reset and Douglas heels be activated both play off using Chapman's reflex points to downregulate or upregulate, depending on use, the neurolymphatic system. How does this work? So in general, these are pretty technical things. So let's just take this from the sky view. So essentially different, what this is, the Chapman's reflex points are essentially irritants to your lymphatic system that cause a heightened stress response. So essentially what this is trying to do is to get you to identify or stimulate areas that change the way your autonomic nervous system responds. So I think what they're trying to accomplish, and I'm not very familiar with this, but the point is that by changing the fluid of your lymphatic system, that has a positive effect on what part of your nervous system your autonomic nervous system is working. So is it your fight or flight, or is it more your rest and digest system? So by pushing on certain things, that gets stuff to change. So Alex, you know anything about it? You don't know anything about it, right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but certainly, speaking for the lymphatic system helps to move things around. So it helps to move our hormones around, helps to move our our fluid around. It circulates around our whole body. So just kind of think if you get bogged down in one area for whatever reason, that can be overuse in an area, or we're going to use that term tightness or overactivation in an area, or underuse in another area, all the reasons that maybe the lymphatic system can be influenced. Just think how that is going to change the circulation of your fluids and things like that. And kind of since I've started doing a little bit more in the pelvic health world, lymphatics can be a big part of it. And it has been very interesting in how it's influenced my practice, because I do see how some of the places where people tend to hold tension and maybe aren't utilizing appropriately does follow some of where, if we look at where our lymphatic trunks lie and stuff, there are close correlations with some of them. And so it's interesting in teaching how to let go of certain areas, how to move certain areas, and considering the lymphatic system with that, and me doing potentially manual work on it, or teaching someone how to do manual work on it. I would say that I have gotten a lot of positive results considering the lymphatic system. So I think there could be something there. I just don't know anything about that in particular.
So any closing remarks, Alex?
No, I don't think so. I think discover what your sleep routine is and figure out what might work for you, and take the time to kind of play with it and experiment with it and see what might help you.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I think the advice of not waiting until it's time to go to bed to figure out or give any thought to it at all, which I think a lot of us are in that boat. You got to think about it during the day, because those factors matter as much as what's happening right before you go to bed.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add is, I think I've said this before about stuff, and I don't know if this is just recall bias, which is you just think about the things that are what most commonly comes up on your mind, but you have to make a plan. You have to understand what you're doing to figure out what parts of it are wrong, or which parts could be better, or which parts are good and that you need more of it. So that'd be my only recommendation. So thank you all for listening. And as always, it was a pleasure answering your questions. And if you would like to participate in these entertaining and informative discussions, we would love to have you as a member. You can go to advancingathletics.com/subscribe to see what we have to offer. And we would love to have you a part of our family here. So remember, everything that we do here in Fuel, Move, Recover is entirely member funded. So it's entirely up to you guys who get to drive the content and the discussions, and as well as have exclusive access to us. So, and remember too that we make sure to give back and do the right thing by doing free seminars for first responders, as well as, depending on if you join the Protect and Serve plan, you also get access to the shout outs that you hear at the end of our show and see in the show notes and you see put on social media. Until we talk to you next week, make sure that you serve others, but pay yourself. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
The Fuel, Move, Recover podcast is a product of Advancing Athletics, LLC. You can follow us on Instagram at Fuel, Move, Recover and Facebook at Advancing Athletics. This podcast is funded by our members at fuelmoverecover.com. Their membership is matched with free seminars on performance and wellness for underserved municipalities in Ohio and beyond. Come join the FMR family to improve your well-being while supporting others. The following departments and charities are the shout-outs of our patrons with Protect and Serve memberships: the Stark County Sheriff's Office, the Task Force Dagger Foundation, the Teacher's Desk, Veterans Outdoors, and the Woonsocket, Rhode Island Police Department.